SoFi stock's up around 15% this week. It's up almost 48% in the last month and up over 100% in the last 12 weeks. So this stock is looking really bullish and is definitely worth your attention. So in this video, I'm going to talk about a potential trade opportunity towards that $24 target and also talk about some trade management tips if you're already in the stock entering around $15. Let's take a look. I'd like to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/DavidB for the 5 best stocks to buy now. Use my special link to get $200 off their epic annual subscription. Now, if you find value in my analysis of SoFi stock today or other stocks on the channel, you may also find value in my email newsletter. If you subscribe, I'll share with you professional trading tips to help you make more profits trading stocks. Link in the description below. Check it out. On the weekly chart for SoFi stock, we can see it's looking really bullish. It has surged around 40% in the last 3 weeks, and it looks as if it wants to move higher up towards that target of $24. Now, there is a possible entry on the daily chart, which I'll talk about in a moment. If you look at the price action for SoFi over the past few months, we can see that since this peak here around $18.41, it was sold off. It did fall into support around about $8.50 before. It has moved up over the last couple of months. It made this peak here around $14.50 in the last week of April. It pulled back, found some support short term around $12.71, and now it's taken off in the last 5 weeks, with the price peaking out yesterday's session on Thursday at $21 and it closed high. So it's looking bullish, and it does look as if it wants to move higher, potentially to that target of $24. So if you were to buy SoFi tomorrow and the price keeps going up to $24, potentially you've got an upside of 17% before that next level of potential resistance. So not too bad, not fantastic. Obviously, the best entry was around $15 down here after price retraced after this peak, and you could have entered here. So you'd be around 40% in profit right now if you'd entered at $15. So if you did that, well done. Now, if you want to get into SoFi, there isn't any obvious rules at the moment on the weekly chart, because basically we've had 3 weeks up, totally bullish price action with SoFi. So there's been no pullback since this surge up, and probably we are due a pullback perhaps next week, which could offer an entry in the coming weeks after it tests the selling pressure. But there is a possible entry on the daily chart. So you can see on the daily chart, I've marked out this price peak here of around $18.92. which was the high point for Monday, 30th of June. So that was the most recent price peak. And you can see there was some selling pressure the day after on the 1st of July. So you could have used this pullback to assess the selling pressure and if the buyers were going to come back in and take control and move the price higher. And that's what they did. And you can see here, price moved up over the following days, with Monday, the 7th of July, so obviously Monday this week, buyers came in and they did take the price higher and close above that previous peak of the following session. So you could have used that rule when the buyers took the price above that peak to enter perhaps any day on that Monday session, or you could have waited for the next trading day, Tuesday, to enter on confirmation on Tuesday's market open, and that would have got you in around about market open, which was $19.80. So that's a rule you could have taken. Effectively, we're saying that the buyers have taken the price up to this peak here, peaking out here. The peak here was, it was $18.92. There was selling pressure the next day, and the sellers took the price down to this bar's low here of $17.35. That's all they had. So the sellers had their chance to take it down. They only took it down, a small amount before the buyers came back in the next day on Wednesday and then Thursday, And you can see then the following week, so this Monday gone, they took it higher and it closed above this peak here. So you could enter on that rule once price has confirmed that it's created a higher base short term and closed the other side of this peak. So using that daily rule would have got you in at $19.80 on the market open Tuesday this week. And if you're targeting that $24 resistance level, which is, if I zoom out, you can see that 24 level is relating to this peak up here created in November 2021. So if you're using that $24 target, then this would give you about a 25% upside to that next level of possible resistance. And you could place your stop loss corresponding to this low here of this pullback bar here, the low of 1735 on the Tuesday. So about a 12% stop loss, which is acceptable, and a risk to reward of 1.93, which is also okay. So you can see back on the weekly chart, I have marked up that entry which we just discussed on the daily chart. So from there, 25% upside towards that target of $25. But of course, you might already be in the trade, and there was a really great entry around about $15, and that relates to the price action here. So we can see SoFi found support around 8.59. It moved up from there, broke the unconfirmed trend line to create this first peak around about $14.50. Now from here, it did come back slightly with an inside bar. It moved higher. It didn't close above that peak. It came back down and found support around about this 12.67 level. Around about here, this bar low here, before it did start moving up. This week was a little bit higher, closed higher again. It tried to push higher this week in week commencing 9th of June. It got rejected, closed low, but it wasn't until this week here, the 16th of June commencing, where SoFi closed high above this peak here. So if you are using weekly rules, then you could have entered the week after following that confirmation, and that would have put your entry on market open this week here, which would have been around about $15 on market open. So if you'd entered at $15 on the first day 2 weeks ago, and you could have used your stop loss could have been placed around about this low here, around about 12.73. So 15% stop loss from that entry point of $15. And then of course, that target of $24 gives you, much more upside considering the target of $24. So entering at $15, you could have targeted this peak here around $18 as your first take profit target. And then the second profit target would have been this $24 up here. If you're in this trade, obviously the price action has triggered this first take profit level of $18. So, you could have sold already and exited with a good profit of 22%. But of course, you might want to keep holding. It looks as if SoFi is bullish and wants to move higher. It does look as if it wants to move towards that $24 target up here. You might want to hold it for the next few weeks and maybe achieve that, that profit of 60%, considering the $15 entry. So obviously in this situation, when you're in profit, the first thing you want to do is consider move your stop loss up to lock in some profits. Now in this scenario, using the weekly chart, it is quite difficult because there hasn't been a pullback, in the last 3 weeks to create that higher trough. However, I think a sensible thing to do the first thing to do, move it to break even. That's the first thing. Move it to $15 just to move it to break even. And I think potentially, you could move it a bit higher. Potentially, you could think about moving it towards maybe $16 or $17. And I say 16 or 17 because it's still about 15% away from the current close for SoFi, about $20. So it gives you some wiggle room to move in case there's a pullback next week. And based on the price action, I think we've had 3 really bullish bars up. it does look as if this week SoFi is going to close high. So it is possible, after this big move up here, that SoFi is going to pull back, and it might come back and test maybe $17.50, maybe this peak here. That would be pretty normal. Remember, if it does come back to that level, it's only retracing around about 25% of this larger move. So that's quite normal. Some sellers will take profits before other buyers might come back in for the bigger move towards $24. So, in terms of trade management, if you're in at $15, you could take some profits now. You could take off 50% of your position. You could look at perhaps selling your initial capital and just leaving the profit in the market to run further. You could sell all of it, wait for a pullback, and then take a second trade once price comes back down and find support, perhaps at this level. That's an option. Obviously, we don't know. SoFi could keep going, right? It could keep punch through to $24 in the next few weeks. We just don't know. But I think in terms of risk management, you've got to think about perhaps next week's going to be a pullback. So where should you move your stop loss to? Perhaps, break even, $16, $17 could be a good option depending on your risk appetite. So overall, SoFi stock is looking bullish. There is an entry potentially in the next few days with a small percentage profit up towards $24. I think the good entry was about $15, for a short-term trade. But of course, if you're an investor and looking at more medium to long term, I think this fintech stock is looking really great. And I think it's going to push towards $24 in the next few months and perhaps, push on from there. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are you bullish on SoFi? Are you trading it right now? What are your rules? I'm keen to learn from your skills and experience. Thanks for watching.